What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. August is over, which means it's time to rank all the new releases I saw this month from worst to best. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your favorite movies this month were, as well as your least favorite. As always, this is just my list and not a definitive ranking. Also, make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. Now, as a reminder, I have not seen every single movie I wanted to see this month, especially as I've just been playing catch up non-stop from the other months where I missed a lot. But I did get to see 32 new releases in August, which was a considerable improvement over the last 3 months, so I managed to cover a lot of ground. As always, anything I missed, I will try getting into the next month, but let's not waste any more time, and let's jump into what I actually did see. In last place is He's All That, which goes down as one of the meanest, shallowest movies I've seen all year. While this is based on a story that itself doesn't particularly age the best in some areas, this doesn't even attempt to give us sympathetic characters or anything remotely of value. Its jokes are terribly unfunny, its two leads have zero chemistry with one another, it's riddled with cliches, and there's a lesson by the end about how we should just look the other way whenever someone treats us terribly, which legitimately got me angry for a moment. And all in all, it just made for one of the most unpleasant experiences I had watching a film this year. At number 31 is The Virtuoso, a complete mess of a film that makes what's meant to be a serious thriller come off like a bumbling comedy of errors. It's filled with condescending and obnoxious narration from a pretentious main character, and it's heard all throughout the film. And while that's bad enough on its own, it then proceeds to contradict just about everything it established in said narration, with characters making one mistake after another that completely goes against who they're supposed to be. And it all leads to a giant twist ending that you can see coming from a mile away. Now, despite the always reliable Abby Cornish and the legendary Anthony Hopkins' presence here, it was nowhere near enough to save this one. At number 30 is Above Suspicion, a choppy, disjointed experience that doesn't quite do justice to its meaty source material. While you do have a talented cast here, no one's given a ton to do, especially a somewhat miscast Emilia Clarke. There are also very surface-level depictions of things like drug addiction and abuse, boiling everyone down to cartoonish stereotypes, and never giving us a reason to care about any of them. While I'm sure you can tell a compelling movie from this story, this just isn't it. At number 29 is Sweet Girl, an action thriller starring Jason Momoa and Isabel Merced that should have been a political thriller starring Jason Momoa and Isabella Merced. Given the fact that the tension stems from a corrupt pharmaceutical company blocking life-saving medication from being produced, this could have been a very timely thriller about said corruption that would have been powerful given the pandemic. Unfortunately, it goes down the route of a generic action thriller, and not a very good one at that, often being plagued by choppy choreography, illogical decisions, and one of the most ludicrous plot twists I've seen in a movie all year, as it added nothing to the story and made for an overall disappointing experience. At number 28 is Don't Breathe 2, an utterly pointless and unnecessary sequel that attempts to rehabilitate the villain of the previous movie, but simply by barely acknowledging the events of said film, rather than having him come to terms with them. And it leads to a character arc that doesn't quite feel earned, which is a shame because Stephen Lang is once again a strong enough presence here, and some of the action-driven sequences are done well enough. But I think this would have benefited immensely had this focused on an entirely new character, and then at the very least, it would have been a decent enough, if generic, horror thriller. At number 27 is Teddy, a film that tries to be a werewolf movie, a dark comedy, and a coming-of-age drama all in one, and the results are pretty mixed for me. It's a major slow burn of a film, with most of its emotional beats never feeling like these huge moments, and most of its thrills and its comedic moments come from subtle little interactions or seemingly throwaway lines, keeping things at one energy level for much of the film. So it's the sort of movie I think you need to be in a certain mindset to see, and I think this actually has the best chance of improving upon a second viewing. But overall, I had a hard time getting into this one, despite some funny moments and the performance by Anthony Bajon as the title character. Like I said, maybe it will improve second time around, but on this viewing, I just wasn't much of a fan. At number 26 is Falling, and these next few are either films I thought were okay or liked enough but would just recommend proceeding with caution. This is the directorial debut of Viggo Mortensen, and it's very well acted while also exploring themes like the effects of trauma, especially coming from family members. But while this was a decent enough film, it's also a bit much. Lance Henriksen as Mortensen's father spews nothing but hateful insults the entire film, And by the entire film, I mean a good chunk of the dialogue is just him expressing his horrifying viewpoints. And because of the amount of times it leans into this, it does come off as a little one note. Now, while it does lead to an emotionally explosive ending that I would call satisfying, I just don't know if we needed nearly 2 hours to get there. At number 25 is Night of the Kings, which made the shortlist for Best International Feature earlier this year and did receive some rave reviews from independent outlets. And it's a nice looking film, employing a technique known as magical realism to give off this hypnotic, dreamlike quality with some beautiful direction and cinematography, along with some really solid acting. But with that tends to be an emphasis on lingering shots and dialogue-driven moments that maybe go on for a bit too long, leaving for a pacing that might not always be consistently engaging. Now, if you like these more methodical films that are more poetic in nature, you may get something out of this, but I can tell you this definitely won't be for everyone. At number 24 is The Last Letter from Your Lover, a pretty safe and by-the-numbers romantic drama focusing on 2 stories in 2 different time periods, and the stuff in the past allows our characters in the present to grow, and they form a bond, and so on and so forth. It's a film that doesn't really offer any surprises, though while these sort of films aren't normally my thing, I thought it was a decent enough watch, as the performances and its lighter tone are what really sell it for me, in particular during the present-day sequences with Felicity Jones, which were what really kept me invested. It's the sort of film I'd only say check out if you really like romantic dramas, as it's otherwise nothing groundbreaking, but it's by no means a must-see or anything. At number 23 is Bleed With Me, one of the latest films to hit Shudder, which is yet another slow burn horror movie confined to one location with a limited amount of characters. With a runtime of only 80 minutes with credits, and with much of the film confined to a cabin in the woods, it's clear writer-director Amelia Moses was only able to do so much, probably for budget reasons, and it gives it this rinse and repeat feel. So it doesn't quite leave as emotional of an impact as it could have. But it's still fine though. It's clear Moses can set horror atmosphere well, there were some solid character moments weaved in, while all the performances were solid enough for us to care. So it doesn't make for a bad time, and it succeeds as a nice casual watch. It's just that it probably could have done more, and it felt more like an exercise for both the cast and crew. At number 22 is The Man Who Sold His Skin, one of the nominees for Best International Feature earlier this year, which takes aim at topics such as the treatment of refugees, exploitation, and the art scene. And when it hits, it lands really well with its somewhat satirical approach to real-world topics. Though I found its shifts from almost heightened social commentary to restrained moments that were more introspective to be a little jarring, and in turn, it caused some pacing issues for me. It's still not a bad film overall, with some great direction and solid performances, and it does have something to say, so while it doesn't always consistently come together, it's pretty engaging whenever it does. At number 21 is Fear Street Part 3, 1666, a decent enough end to the horror trilogy based on the R.L. Stine books of the same name. I think the thing that ultimately hurts this entry in particular is the actual 1666 segment, which takes up about half the movie's runtime before jumping back to 1994, where the first film took place. The problem is this part didn't need to be as long as it was, filled with way too much exposition, as well as some notably cringy Irish accents that would often be distracting. Now, once we get back to the 1994 stuff, it did pick up and provide a nice, satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. It's just because of how uneven the quality was between each half is what makes it only even out to just be a decent movie. At number 20 is Candisha, a Shudder original movie that mixes Candyman and The Curse of La Llorona, but in the vein of a teen slasher like A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a film that wears its influences on its sleeve heavily, for better or worse, as it doesn't necessarily offer much new to the genre. But what we got wasn't bad for what it was. Where it actually shines is that it does have some fairly strong character work, with the dynamics among this large group of friends being one of its driving forces. It's just the fact that its horror elements, while entertaining enough, can feel one note. I think had it been a little stronger in terms of its slasher elements, or even its social commentary, given the actual legend it's based on, then it would have complemented the character work really well. At number 19 is Reminiscence, a film that got a lot of hatred this month, and while it can certainly feel too overdramatic at times, and its constant use of voiceover became taxing very quickly, I really think this did a little more right than it did wrong. It has a great lead performance by Hugh Jackman, along with some stylish direction by Lisa Joy, who channeled a lot of older film noir and sci-fi classics. Plus, at the heart of it was an intriguing mystery that led to a number of gripping enough scenarios, and despite the fact that the execution would be on the cornier side at times, I found myself always wanting to know what comes next. At number 18 is Major Grom, Plague Doctor, and everything from here on out were all 7 out of 10 or above for me. This is a film that does sometimes play similarly to more popular comic book movies like V for Vendetta and The Dark Knight, especially due to its generic antagonist, but what it lacks in originality, it makes up for in fun. It has a tone that mostly doesn't take itself too seriously, a lot of well-choreographed action scenes, stunning visuals, a nice sense of humor, as well as solid performances that make up for its thin characterizations. While it can feel familiar overall, it still does plenty of things right to make up for it. At number 17 is The Swarm, an absolutely bone-chilling, eerie little film that features a slow burn take on creature features. While there are a fair amount of sequences of these killer locusts attacking people, and it is quite gruesome, what really drives this forward is our main character, whose obsessive relationship with the locusts causes her mental state to deteriorate and her world to collapse. The film's strengths lie in its character drama, and it would do quite a great job there. Though it is worth noting, it's also a slower, more methodical film, so don't go in expecting this fast-paced thrill ride, but if you know what you're in for, it will certainly leave you unnerved. At number 16 is Fear Street Part 1, 1994, the first installment in the Fear Street trilogy, which will be a 90s kid's dream come true, with its stylistic references and Easter eggs, particularly the way it channels Scream. As for everything else beyond its influences, it's still pretty good, even if not always the most consistent. While some of the more dialogue-driven moments are a little surface level with some hit-and-miss performances, its slasher-heavy moments are very gripping and exciting, and there were enough of those moments that I had a fun time with it, making for a solid start to the trilogy. At number 15 is Fear Street Part 2, 1978, the middle film in the Fear Street trilogy, which channels Friday the 13th into a slightly more consistent film than its predecessor. This is easily the most well-acted of all 3 Fear Street films, and makes much better use of all its characters. I'd say the first half does stumble a bit, as some of the character arcs can feel slightly aimless at first, and it still does suffer from the same issues of its character moments feeling watered down compared to its action scenes, but when it all comes together, it still tells an engaging enough story that makes for the best of the 3 Fear Street movies. At number 14 is Vacation Friends, a film that I'm almost shocked to put as high on this list as I did, as it has the makings of a movie that shouldn't work. But it did. Despite the fact that it's as predictable and one-note as it is, it fully commits to providing as many laughs as possible. And it works, mainly due to the talents of all 4 leads, with the chemistry between Lil Rel Howery and John Cena in particular being the biggest highlight for me. Now, I totally get why most people probably won't like it, but I just couldn't resist it. At number 13 is Annette, which will certainly go down as one of the strangest movies of the year, as it's a rock opera that also has spoken word rant, very bizarre cult-like exchanges, new segment-style scene transitions, and a singing 2-year-old puppet. So it is a little out there, but if you actually get past all that, it's actually not that hard to follow, as it's really a straightforward story, just told in an unusual way. But it's a way that I liked, as I thought it was engaging. It was anchored by 2 great performances from Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard, and some gorgeous cinematography to accompany the mostly enjoyable songs. If anything, my criticism boils down to the characters not being totally sympathetic, as well as maybe some songs not working as well as others, but its presentation is actually what I really liked most about it, and it made for one of the most unique movie experiences I had all year. At number 12 is The Boy Behind the Door, a cat and mouse chase movie on Shudder that might not be the most comfortable viewing experience for some people due to its subject matter, but if you're in the mood for a gripping, intense horror movie, this may be worth the watch. While this isn't the most character-driven film out there, it does make up for that by being an incredibly fast-paced thrill ride that does a solid job of constantly holding our attention and not looking to overstay its welcome. With each moment building upon its last to make for an engaging experience, this is one of the better Shudder releases of the year. At number 11 is Jungle Cruise, restarting Disney's trend of making movies based on their theme park attractions. And while they normally don't have a ton of success in that department, I am happy to say this is one of their better efforts here. While it might go on for a tad bit longer than it should, it still makes this a fun enough time thanks to its sense of humor, as well as its strong performances by Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt. Channeling the feel of other adventure films like the Indiana Jones movies, The Mummy, and Disney's own Pirates of the Caribbean, this is a ride certainly worth taking. At number 10 is Vivo, the latest project from Lin-Manuel Miranda and Sony Animation that features some wonderful songs, stunning animation, and a lot of laugh-out-loud humor through some really well-done visual gags. And it's anchored by a solid cast that also includes Zoe Saldana, Brian Tyree Henry, Gloria Estefan, and newcomer Yanira Simo as our other main character, Gabby. While it's very funny, it also knows how to be sweet without being tonally inconsistent. Though I'd say the one thing against it is the fact that it can feel incredibly familiar and it really doesn't reinvent the wheel in terms of its storytelling. But what it lacks in originality, it makes up for in its charm, songs, and humor, making for a fun film that all audiences can enjoy. At number 9 is The Outside Story, a very small-scale but effective dramedy that sees the incredibly likable Brian Tyree Henry in a lead role for the first time, and this proves to be a nice little showcase for his talents, as he bounces around his neighborhood, getting into all these awkward confrontations, all while gaining some life lessons regarding a recent breakup. It's not a very ambitious film, as it mainly looks to just keep a cheery attitude, so even the more intense situations get resolved a bit too quickly, but it's also a film that looks to put a smile on your face, and I'd say it definitely succeeded there, with its sweet, almost laid-back style, offering simple but effective life lessons, with a few laughs along the way. At number 8 is Free Guy, which honestly might be one of the most surprising films on this list, as I was kinda over it before even seeing it, due to the amount of times I just saw the trailer. But not only was this film very funny and a visual delight, but it actually has a bit more to say than I was expecting it to, without getting too bogged down in melodrama. It's like if Ready Player One took its cues from The Truman Show and The Matrix, mixing heartfelt moments with big blockbuster spectacles, making for one of the summer's funnest films. At number 7 is Beckett, and I know this one is probably going to be the film that people disagree with me on the most, as it's a film that got way more hatred than I felt it deserved. While it's not the most character-driven film, I thought we got enough in the first act so that we're able to care about the title character, and once the main events kick in, it's nothing but a fast-paced chase film done in the vein of paranoid thrillers from the 70s, like The Parallax View or Clute. You definitely have to suspend your disbelief in a few instances, mainly towards the end, but it is competently directed, well acted, frequently engaging, and in my opinion, one of the year's most unfairly criticized films. At number 6 is The Night House, a more grounded horror movie that looks to be a deep exploration of grief, though through a supernatural lens. While this one's aesthetically pleasing due to the chilling score, eerie imagery, and great direction by David Bruckner, the one who truly anchors this is Rebecca Hall. She manages to convey the perfect blend of sadness, anger, and confusion, and channels it all into giving what's quite possibly one of my favorite performances of the year. It's a film that doesn't quite answer every single question it raises, as the supernatural elements become grander in scale towards the end, but I think it gives you more than enough to make it a satisfying watch. At number 5 is No Sudden Move, Steven Soderbergh's ensemble crime thriller with an all-star cast that includes Don Cheadle, Benicio del Toro, David Harbour, and among many others, the return of Brendan Fraser, all of whom get their time to shine at least at one point or another. And on top of that, it's just a highly entertaining little heist movie, with a first act that features some of my favorite moments in a Soderbergh movie, period. While its second and third acts don't reach those exact same heights, it's still a consistently enjoyable film, and one of the better recent Soderbergh efforts. At number 4 is Stillwater, a film that's a take on the imprisoned for a crime they didn't commit trope, but instead of being your usual fast-paced action thriller, it instead opts for a more methodical character study. The film is anchored by an excellent lead performance by Matt Damon, who we see have to struggle with a life he built for himself in France, in some of the film's sweeter moments, with doing whatever he needs to do to set his daughter free. While it may seem familiar at times, the character interactions are ultimately what make it, and it can be heartbreaking, thrilling, and even a little funny at times, without feeling too conventional. At number 3 is Candyman, the fourth installment in the Candyman franchise, which is a direct sequel to the original 1992 film. And surprisingly, it's one that I liked even more than that original film. This takes the Candyman lore and vastly expands upon it, adding so much more to the mythology while still honoring the original, while also addressing many of its themes in modern settings. Though while it's in no short supply of the social commentary, it also doesn't forget to deliver on the chills, and it succeeds on nearly every level there, thanks to some fantastic direction by Nia DaCosta and a standout lead performance by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. This is a compelling, timely, and most of all creepy addition to this franchise. At number 2 is Coda, a film that you would think wouldn't be that great, given it's as by the numbers as it can be in terms of its story elements, but what it lacks in originality, it makes up for with a ton of heart and sincerity, brought to life by Sean Heater's wonderful direction and an absolutely knockout performance by Emilia Jones, who perfectly brings out our lead character's passions and frustrations with ease, allowing for so much nuance to be injected into the story. It's also a surprisingly funnier film than you think it would be, though never once punching down at its characters, but still giving everyone the utmost respect they deserve, providing us plenty of laughs to balance out all the times it pulls on our heartstrings. But in first place is The Suicide Squad, James Gunn's vulgar, blood-soaked, action-packed extravaganza that takes some of DC's weirdest characters and makes them feel even more compelling than some of their biggest heroes. Everyone from Harley Quinn to Bloodsport to Ratcatcher 2 to even Polka Dot Man are just an absolute blast to watch, whether it be for just how funny they were or for the amount of heart they bring, which is probably the most surprising thing to say about the Suicide Squad of all teams. And not only does it succeed in terms of great storytelling, but in terms of visual flair as well, as Gunn brings a sense of style to nearly every frame, even down to the scene transition text. I had a lot of fun with it. I've already seen it multiple times, which is a rarity with new releases for me these days. It's my current favorite DCEU movie, one of my favorite movies of the year so far, and most importantly, my #1 movie that I saw in August. And that's that for August, and we're now 2/3 of the way through this year. As always, anything I just didn't get around to this month, like The Protégé and Respect, I will try having for you in September's wrap-up. But if you like what you saw, make sure to subscribe, as I do these at the end of every month, along with what I'm looking forward to at the beginning of each month, so I can give you plenty to put on your watch list. In the meantime though, what were your favorite films of August and what were your least favorite? Did you agree with this list at all? Did you disagree with it? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.